This car, one of the most iconic feats in automotive design and innovation, was lost to the public for over 30 years and nearly vanished completely. By chance, this engineering marvel ended up in crates and sat untouched in a Southern California garage until finally being unearthed in the late 1980s. This is the unlikely story of the Oldsmobile F88. By the 1950s, most American middle-class homes were characterized by two things: the ubiquitous presence of a flickering television and a family car. Riding on the heels of the Second World War, the country was confident, powerful, and looking to embrace the sweeping tide of modern technology.
General Motors, the American automobile industry, Detroit, were the crown jewels of the business world. Everything revolved around this center, and you had literally from the 20s to the 50s, a quantum leap in transportation took place where the cars by the 50s were drop dead gorgeous, and all you had to do was just look out the window of your car and you were surrounded by these incredibly sexy, curvaceous painted sculptures cruising by, and Harley called them motoramic masterpieces.
The war was over, people were trying to feel good, and everyone could finally afford a car now. And cars weren't just limited to one per family. Individuals started having cars. It was all about expressing yourself, and sports cars to this day have been the most popular, like convertible. If you couldn't afford the flashy new car, you take an older one and hop it up. And so the 50s were when the car culture exploded.
GM was at the forefront of the automotive revolution and always looking to push boundaries. And with the overwhelming numbers of makes and models to choose from, they enlisted master designer Harley Earl to create something new, something so unique and stunning, it would render last year's models obsolete.
He made car design so successful at General Motors, every other car company had to follow suit and create their own car design department.
GM had just announced the Corvette in 1953 for the GM Autorama. It did take some time for the public to warm up to it. It was entirely a new concept, and it really was a little underpowered. It didn't take long for the engineers at Oldsmobile to understand that a major flaw in the Corvette was the engine.
People don't know this really, but making a brand new car line is as expensive, if not more expensive, than making a Hollywood blockbuster movie. And Harley, you could just imagine him being from Hollywood and all that showmanship he brought to the automotive world. He's just like, build it. And it was just like a movie director saying, cut, let's take it, let's build it into a model. And then they show it to the board of directors, and then they're like, oh my God, we have another winner.
General Motors had the Motorama, which was their own car show, which used to make about 5 stops in the United States, starting off at the Waldorf Astoria in New York. And each division of General Motors was assigned a dream car. They didn't call them concept cars then, they were dream cars. And Oldsmobile's entry happened to be the F88.
This super stylized machine, featuring a light, fully fiberglass body with a 102-inch wheelbase, was prompted by a big push from Harley Earl, designer Bill Mitchell, Ken Pickering, and new GM engineer Zora Duntov, attempting to take the idea of the Corvette and launch it into the stratosphere. And with the addition of a 250 horsepower V8, the famed Oldsmobile Rocket 88, and its 4-speed hydromatic transmission, the F88 was primed to wow the public with the allure of more power and decidedly more elegant styling.
Well, the F88 was such a strong building block on top of the Corvette that many people of the day that I interviewed called it the Oldsvet, because it was on a Corvette frame.
You could tell it was based on a Corvette, but one look at that front grille, it was all Oldsmobile.
It had a high-performance Rocket 88 overhead valve V8 engine. And it really was one of America's first muscle cars, too.
Putting the right size engine in it really made Chevrolet nervous. And so the engineers at Chevrolet went to Harley Earl, who had signed off on the project, and said, "You've got to shut this down. This is going to kill the Corvette."
They had directions from Detroit, from the headquarters, to destroy the cars. And they claim one of the biggest reasons for that was liability.
The F-88 never really had a fair chance, I don't think. It was by far the superior car. It just came from a division that didn't have the marketing clout that Chevrolet had. I think that was the biggest weakness that it had. And sometimes the best car doesn't always win.
As the story goes, every F-88 prototype was ordered to be destroyed after the project was officially terminated. But somehow, one car remained. The circumstances surrounding the decision to preserve one of these concept cars is still, to this day, cloaked in rumor and mystery. But the story seems to suggest Harley Earl couldn't reconcile with the idea of destroying every trace of the F-88. He needed to find a clandestine way to keep the car alive. Eventually, a plan was hatched. Earl harbored a tremendous respect for another prominent designer and innovator of the era, owner of Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg, E.L. Cord.
The car ended up in Cord Haven, my grandfather's mansion in Beverly Hills, and to us it was just a fort. And I was more interested in the crates than what was really in it. All of my uncles and the older cousins thought it was a Corvette. None of us really knew what lurked under those wooden pallets. So it sat there for a number of years and it just never was put together. Harley Earl had pitched the idea that this could be the rebirth of Cord. He said, call it the Cord 2, whatever you want, but one of the most popular Cord models is called the Cabriolet. It's a two-door, two-seater, very similar to what a Corvette is. And so that's why Harley Earl said, maybe this could be the rebirth of Cord. So that is how E.L. got possession of it. And unfortunately, he didn't really do anything with it. So once the house was torn down, it changed hands a number of times. And then it finally was put together, and now it resides at the Gateway Auto Museum. A few years ago, I finally got a chance to see it finished and built, and that was very exciting for me. It is truly a spectacular car.
Once the car was completely rebuilt, looking like it had just rolled out of a Waldorf Astoria in 1954, the automotive community took notice. The signature Oldsmobile grille was elegant yet aggressive. The sweeping lines and curves gave the car a sexy look while suggesting tremendous speed. This was clearly a work of design magic, an absolute forgotten gem, now unearthed and given back to the world.
As far as I know, the only motion picture of the automobile of the F-88 was shot by this 15-year-old kid up in Lansing at a Shriner parade.
My father, who was a Shriner, said, Donnie, why don't you bring your movie camera downtown? There's going to be a Shriners parade. Okay. Jack Wolfram, who was also a Shriner, was a head of Oldsmobile. And they brought up like 10 98 convertibles, 1955. And along with that, he brought the F-88 to the parade. When I filmed the car in 1954 and 55, of course, I was just a kid with this brand new camera, and I was enamored with this automobile. It was like, to me, it was like a spaceship of the future.
It would have been a terrible shame if this car had been lost, if this one survivor hadn't made it. And I think my grandfather would have loved to have seen what the car looks like today, restored to all its glory and what might have been. You know, it is a fabulous piece of automotive history.
How it was reintroduced at the turn of the 21st century and how it's taking us forward, I'd say it's an incredible national design treasure.
No question. It's extremely rare. It's the only one. To my knowledge, none of the others have survived.
You know, the Corvette is America's favorite sports car, and the Oldsmobile of all of them could have been the one to dethrone the king.
Nearly forgotten by automotive history, this incredible example of Harley Earl's legacy seems to have some kind of divine providence. The F-88 lives on. Whether it's a fluke or whether it was destined, the F-88 is alive and well, and a beautiful reminder that grace and power can exist together in harmony.